Continuing in Epicurus' commentary on his metaphysics in the letter to Herodotus, using the Hackett edition here, let's look at pages 13 and 14, that's sections 63 through 69, in which he gives his view of the soul. He says, "Next one must see, by making reference to our sense perceptions and feelings, for these will provide the most secure conviction, that the soul is a body made up of fine parts distributed throughout the entire aggregate, most closely resembling breath, with a certain admixture of heat, in one way resembling breath, and in another resembling heat. There is also the part which is much finer than even these, and because of this is more closely in harmony with the rest of the aggregate too. All of this is revealed by the abilities of the soul, its feelings, its ease of motion, its thought processes, and the things whose removal leads to our death." So, the first thing to understand and remember here is Epicurus thinks the soul is a physical thing. It's a physical thing that inhabits the body. It's made up of really, how does he say it, fine parts. Some parts much finer than others. The soul resembles heat in some respects, but most closely seems to resemble breath, i.e. air. The soul is like a very thin mist or vapor that inhabits the body and is spread throughout the body. Keep in mind that the classical idea of the soul is that which gives life to the body. The classic Latin word is anima. The anima is what animates the body. So the soul is not just some conscious thing separate from the body. That's not the classical perspective. That's something you get after Descartes, many centuries later. The classical view of the soul is what gives life to the body. Now, Epicurus does have perhaps some comparisons to Descartes here, in that he thinks the soul is largely a thing that is involved with consciousness. But it is a thing spread throughout the body, which is very not like Descartes. The soul is in the entire body, and the nearest description we seem to be able to get of it is it's like a very fine gas, vapor, mist, breath that inhabits the whole body. And it is a physical thing. The first and last thing to remember in Epicureanism about the soul is a physical thing. Further, one must hold firmly that the soul is most responsible for sense perception. So the second thing to remember, the soul is responsible for sense perception. Here is that point where Epicurus does resemble Descartes. The soul is what makes sense perception possible. The soul is the source of consciousness, and sense perception is the origin of consciousness. The soul would not have acquired this power if it were not somehow enclosed by the rest of the aggregate. The soul is responsible for sense perception, but it is only able to do that because it's entirely within the body. The soul is 100% within the body, etc., etc. And that is why when the soul has departed, it does not have sense perception. There's no sense perception, and there's no consciousness when the soul is not in the body. In fact, there's no soul, for that matter. But the immediate point is that there is no consciousness unless the soul is present in the body. In other words, there's no life after death. There's no soul departing from the body and continuing to exist in some other location or in some other mode of existence after death, etc. That is why the soul, as long as it is in the body, will never lack sense perception, even if some other part has departed, etc., etc. When the entire aggregate is destroyed, the soul is scattered and no longer has the same powers, nor can it move. Consequently, it does not then in fact have the power of sense perception. So I guess if you want to get technical, if the body is destroyed, the soul, understood as this fine breath-like substance pervading the entire body, yeah, it doesn't just disappear. All is made of atoms. Atoms are indestructible. The soul is made of atoms. The atoms don't cease to exist. This accumulation of breath-like atoms pervading the body, those atoms continue to exist, but they're dissipated. They don't have the function of soul anymore. The parts of the soul continue to exist, but the soul, understood as that which is spread throughout the body and gives the whole thing, gives us the power of sense perception, that ceases to exist. Death. For it is not possible to conceive of it as perceiving if it is not in this complex and not executing these movements. Moreover, one must also think of this, that if we apply the term incorporeal, i.e. non-physical, immaterial, in the most common meaning of the term, to what could be conceived of as... Let me start the sentence again. Moreover, one must also think of this, that we apply the term incorporeal, in the most common meaning of the term, to what could be conceived of as independently existing. But the incorporeal cannot be thought of as independently existing, except for the void. And the void can neither act nor be acted upon, but merely provides the possibility of motion through itself for bodies. Consequently, those who say the soul is incorporeal are speaking to no point, for if it were of that character, it can neither act nor be acted upon at all. The soul is physical. Full stop. That's what he's saying. The soul is a physical thing. The soul is not an incorporeal or a non-physical thing, and that's just how it is. There is no life after death. There is no soul continuing as soul after death. The mist-like substance, the vaporish, the fine particles resembling breath, in some respects resembling heat, pervading the body, is made of atoms, and they all dissipate at death, and there's no more consciousness afterwards. There's no point in saying that the soul is incorporeal. And in fact, if it were non-physical, it could neither act nor be acted upon at all. If it were not physical, how would it connect to the physical body? How would it affect the physical body or be affected by the physical body? Thus saith Epicurus. The soul is physical. Now, this is meant to emphasize that there's no life after death. Let me give you a hint on the ethics, though no doubt this will come up again and again in this series. This is a good thing, Epicurus thinks. That there's no life after death is a good thing. Because there's nothing unpleasant in non-existence. As Socrates had said, the nearest equivalent to non-existence we're familiar with is being fast asleep. And frankly, most of us probably wish we could get more sleep. We wish you could have that more. But there's nothing bad about not being conscious anymore. There's nothing unpleasant about the state of not being conscious anymore, not even being there to be conscious. And in fact, Epicurus thinks that the fear of death is largely informed by certain religious notions where we are afraid of what the gods might do to us after death. And if we can just learn to not fear death, and in part learn... Let me begin this sentence again. If we can learn to not fear death, that will make life better. And part of learning to not fear death involves learning that we don't need to fear death, because being dead just means not existing, not experiencing anything anymore, which is nothing to be afraid of. And it's not a state where you need to worry about your soul existing and being punished by the gods. Okay, more on Epicurean metaphysics and ethics in the next video. Thanks for watching.